I want to talk about something kind of positive for a change. 'Cause you know what I talk about so often on this channel? You know what I say so often in this based arc that we've entered here, ever since I let the cat out of the bag, essentially, with the letting the cat out of the bag video, I've been more and more emotionally honest sort of about empathy, how I don't really feel a lot of it, how I don't really feel any of it, and how I've sort of presented myself almost as an insane, an insane individual in a somewhat facetious way, and also in a totally brutally honest way as well. Sort of talking about, this concept, this idea of just literally not having any remorse, any guilt, not really caring about other people in a normal way, But I want to talk about why it is that I do love the people who I talk to. Why it is that what are the things about them that I enjoy about them enough to continue speaking to them, regardless of however much direct attachment may be there in the event of death. I don't get sad when people die. That's just not how I work. Um, but what is it about these people that I continue talking to them for? What is it about these people that in some small way will make me happy when I speak to them? I think a lot of it has to do with not just being able to be funny, not just being able to, be able to hold your place in the room and be someone who can sort of direct the attention towards you, because that is something that I respect a lot. People who can make the room theirs, people who can control the room in such a way to put the spotlight on them and to be funny, in doing so. But I also, I respect people a lot who have firm beliefs. I respect people who have principles that they adhere to, who have a system, an ideological system that's in place, that they follow, that's theirs. That's one thing. And for that to be interesting. If it's completely uninteresting and as a result of it you just hate me, then well, that is what it is. But like, I feel like, the differences between people, the differences between their beliefs are the things that make them all the more interesting. If you have people who believe a totally different thing and yet they're completely firm in their beliefs, that's something I can respect a lot because it gives me a challenge. It gives me someone who I can now fight. If I have a debate, with one of my best friends, for example, no thank you. One of my best friends, no thank you. We argue all the time just about the fundamentals of life. We argue all the time. Well, I mean, on the fundamentals of life, we pretty much agree on most things. It's just the minute differences, the very specific nuances, the kind of preferential elements that we disagree upon. We agree on like 90% of things most of the time. But there's this 10%, especially when it comes to like political economy. Most of the reason I disagree with him on just like systems of political economy and such happen to do with preferences, where like I have an idea of what would benefit me the most as an individual, and that idea is not something that would benefit him the most. I have an idea based on years of extensive research by this point into history, economics, and these types of things that would lead me to believe that a certain type of society would be better for me as an individual, and therefore for the entirety of society itself to then go back and build more things, to create more art, to create a better life for everybody in order to have the freedom to create more art, etc. But he doesn't buy into that. He believes in abolishing society itself, to have decentralized, essentially autonomous tribes that still have technology. He's not an Anprim, um, but essentially technology left over from the old world that we build upon. I disagree with that because I believe that by having a more connected world with more people building more things, you're going to have a more likely chance of better things being built because there's just more people doing it. For instance, you look at anime, for instance. Why is it that anime is so interesting? Because so many shows are being produced. When you have so many different shows being produced in so many different genres, you're going to have a much better chance of good things being produced because there are going to be genres that placate to everyone's tastes. And so you get a situation where you can find a show that reaches your most specific fetish, your most specific interest, the most minute possible element that anyone would consider in art that you seem to care a lot about, you'll find in anime, because there's just so much of it being produced, because there's so many people being in, being in the driver's seat. There's so many different hands being exchanged, so many different ideas that are able to be used, because they have a system in place that allows people to do that. Without a connected, interconnected society that's global, with things like resources and finance being actively shared between nations, and without a coherent national identity, or without just like art from all other nations being shared to sort of play into that. I think like you just wouldn't have more interesting things being produced, because there would be less things being produced. There's only so many artisans that are going to exist within an autonomous egoist tribe, that like what he talks about, that like, yeah, you may have a decentralized internet that you can use to play with or talk to other people who are in your tribe, but ultimately you're not going to get a ginormous, massive web of constant things being produced by everybody, which is what someone like me wants, because I love material abundance. I love decadence, absorbance, having so much material abundance that everyone is rich, having so much material abundance that people can, aspire to their goals, and continue making more and more and more, and constantly building and constructing, because I know those are things that ultimately benefit me due to my preferences as a human being and what I enjoy. Um, and I love talking with him about this, because I get to pick his brain. I get to understand why he feels differently than I do. And it never turns into like, well, okay, I'm not going to say never, but it never turns into like a spitting fight of like, I'm totally pissed off at you for saying this. Um, Most of the time, it's a pretty rational disagreement. It's us trying to come to an understanding as to what one another believe, rather than to belligerently just throw mud at each other. And that's what I love, is interesting differences. I love having friends who are interesting. That's ultimately the thing that I tend to come back to again and again and again about what I love about my friends, is that they have such unique identities, that if I were to give one core facet that has continually fascinated me and has continually been, the subject of my enjoyment and of my praise, it would be the uniqueness of these individuals. Because there's just so much. There's so many things that I can just endlessly explore about these people I call my friends, because they're just interesting people. There's just things about them that I can keep learning about and having fun with, because they're just so unique as people that I want to hear their perspective on everything, because being unique means you're kind of not there in the world in most cases. You stand out like a sore thumb, you have ideas and experiences that are different than everybody else. And so your views on life and the way that you talk about things are also going to be different. I find that uniqueness inherently interesting. And so that's why I can talk to people who are, on all sides of the political spectrum. That's why I can talk to people who have vastly different ideas than I do, because I just want them to be unique. I just want them to have things that they say that are unique. Um, and in other cases, I have friends that are just really funny. Like my friend Red, oh, he changed his name to Admiral Umaru. Like that guy is like the king of BTFOing people. He does it literally constantly, and it's always fun to be around him, because he's either just BTFOing people, or he has this really positive, upbeat energy where, he's just being really nice. And that's the other thing, is that people who are just nice, like if you're someone who just has a cordial and coy presence, that, you're able to turn the room, you're able to make the room more bright and more sweet just by existing in it, then I'm gonna enjoy talking to you, because you're just a nice person to be around. You raise the spirits, like, and that's who I think of when I think of that idea, is that like being around Red can just make you happy, because he's just a nice guy. And when he's not, it's in a really funny way that he's BTFOing people. Like I look at, I look at my friend Hiki, who has a really interesting life story. Like that guy, when he explains what his life story is and where he came from and all these different experiences he's had as a person, it's so interesting to me. He's just such an interesting guy. Like that's what I love, as I love uniqueness. I love people with different perspectives, with different ideas. I love people who have, like a coherent aesthetic where like, their profile picture is always in like a similar vein, or the way that they sort of personify themselves, in their speech and in their visual presentation has a sort of coherent ideals behind it. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. Someone like Tomoko, she would have a coherent aesthetic persona. She's depressed and sort of lazes around. But you can see that visually. Like visually, you can see that she looks like that, and it's a visual expression of her identity. That can manifest itself in any number of ways, and I love people who are unique enough to be able to manifest their identity in visual forms. Like all of these things, being funny, being nice, being interesting, being unique. These are all things that I just love about my friends. My friend Corax Catalyst, one of my best friends in the world. I can talk with that guy sometimes for 8 hours at a time, sometimes for 5 hours at a time, sometimes for, 6 hours. We can just talk over and over and over again. Like there have been periods where I've talked to that guy every single day for like 4 hours each day. Now those periods, they're kind of few and far between. We do talk a lot, but we don't talk that much. That's more so in specific instances. But there have been times where it's gone that far, and there's no silences. We just keep going and off of one another. Like he's always going to understand what I say, because what I say is just stuff that makes sense to him. He just understands. And so when he responds with a point, it's like he's just expanding on the point that I've made already. And then when he says something, it's like I'm doing the same, where we just understand one another so well that we have such a verbal chemistry with one another that we can just complete one another's ideas, complete one another's sentences. We can just communicate in a way that's constantly expanding and building on these ideas. Even though we're different on certain things, we're able to understand those differences nonetheless and to be able to play into them for a more positive effect. And I love talking to him because of that, because it's just infinite growth when I talk to him. It feels like the act of speaking to him is as if I am growing as a person, because the conversations have so much gravitas to them. They're so intense that it feels like we're just constantly having fun or expanding on ideas or learning new things. And it feels like it's a never-ending sense of growth. Like there's literally no silences when we talk. It's just point, respond to point, respond to point, make a joke about it, and sort of go into another point as a result of that. It's not a straight highway. It's the dips and curves and the roundabouts and the car crashes that make all of it interesting. It's those unique things, that ability to just continue going and going and going. It feels like when I talk to my friends, like it's infinite growth. It's not stagnation. It's not sitting around. It's construction. It's building things. The very act of talking to the people who I know feels as if something is being constructed. I don't know if that makes any sense. What I'm saying in a very roundabout and pretentious and annoying and retarded fashion is that I have autism, and also I like the people who I talk to a lot. Words.